There are more than 2 weeks to go before the Indiana General Assembly reaches its midway mark. Some bills are past that halfway point of the legislative process. Senate bills on parental rights, teacher pay increases, water transfer oversight, and access and use of social media by minors are among a few of the bills that are now on their way to the House. And conversely, House approval of regulation reductions on K-12 schools, an immigration notice measure, watershed development commissions, and membership on aviation boards have moved to the Senate for consideration. And we'll talk with guests from both chambers who are following what bill goes where. That's ahead on this week's Primetime. And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. With us today, our 15th District Republican State Senator and Assistant Majority Floor Leader Liz Brown, and 51st District Republican State Representative Tony Isa. And you can join the conversation as well with your questions and comments. Just call the number that you see on the screen. And what you see on the screen are the three of us, Senator Brown, Representative Isa, Liz, Tony. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. So even with February being the shortest month in this long session, it does seem like you can almost see the halfway point from here. How has it been from start to 50% so far, Liz?
It's a lot. It's a budget year, so this is a long session. So as the regular flow of bills are going through, I'm on appropriations, and we're also trying to figure out what the House is going to send us in the budget and what bills we have that have some fiscal costs to them and how to manage that. So things are moving quickly.
And for an inaugural session, Representative Tony,
walked in and was
like?
told that this is the most bills that have come through since the 80s from the House. So we are putting together a lot of language.
Yeah, I'll bet. I think this may be your sixth budget session, Liz, something like that?
Yes.
How do you prepare for these special? You remember, what the best strategy is to take on something as impactful as all this?
Well, I can tell you that early last fall, started having meetings with different constituencies. We knew going into this year we had a Medicaid shortfall. We knew revenues were going to be a little tight. We don't quite have the Medicaid or the revenue forecast yet, which will really help us bake in the budget. But there's a lot of people out there that you talk to and try to manage expectations as best you can.
And do you recall the coaching or guidance, or just take it one day at a time, what you were hearing, Tony, as you were preparing for January?
So, yeah, the $1 billion shortfall in Medicaid was a huge opportunity. And, I've been told many times, just take a deep breath, relax, until the budget falls through, until we find out where we're at. These bills are all going to change so many times. So what starts out as one thing might turn into something totally different. So just take a deep breath and relax and just contribute where you can.
Well, we're all going to breathe and relax and look forward to speaking with you throughout this time together. We were talking of how sometimes a chamber's approval of legislation can outpace the session calendar. And I'd say, for starters, your parental rights bill is one of those. This is SB 143, because everything needs a number.
Yes.
But what does that bill do? Parental rights secured, strengthened, how?
Yeah, we heard that one in my committee. I'm the chairman of that committee, and it's my bill right out of the gate, first week of session, and just sort of resets the balance. Make sure that parents have a right to the upbringing of their children, vis-a-vis whether it's DCS or whether it's the school system or any other governmental unit. And I'd have to say that that's exactly what we want. We want parents to be able to be involved and understand what's happening even when their child is not physically with them.
And, seeing the similar pattern of legislation on the House side, Tony, the bill you authored regarding membership of aviation boards was passed. It's now off across the hall to the Senate. What does that measure do?
So populations of 38,000, whether it be city or county, And with the shortfall of there being a limited amount of people that are knowledgeable in the airport board space, the aviation board space, just trying to find the most qualified person as opposed to having to seat that with a Democrat or Republican, it just allows it to just open the door for just the most qualified person to be able to lead in that board.
It has to feel good to know in your first year in Indianapolis, a bill of your authorship is working its way forward.
It's exciting.
Also exciting, and this made me smile, and I guess I had 2 years to smile with the title of the bill. It's a new bill, familiar name, Increasing Access to Care for Hoosiers Everywhere, or IACE.
IACE 3.0, Third Health Care Matters Bill.
This has been a journey because we started then with in 2023 with IACE 1 and
Yes.
then the 2 sequels.
Yes.
Take us through the journey to how we got to now on this.
Well, so actually what happens is, you kind of work with, I'm on health committee. I've always been on health committee. This is the 11th session. And so Medicaid providers, the state funds a lot of different healthcare agencies, et cetera. And so it's sort of plugging away at red tape is really what it is. So it started with, as the state rolled out Medicaid and managed care programs, the senior citizens who would be eligible for home modifications, it's a federal entitlement, weren't getting them, like getting a ramp in their house. So that was the genesis of the bill, that little piece. And then, we wanted to modernize how we license and register CNAs, QMAs, which are qualified medical, they give medications. So that's what we sort of added on to that. And the idea is, how can we provide access truly to our Hoosiers without all the red tape, get people who want to get into those professions faster, easier, without the red tape, and make sure that the services they're receiving are working. So we're modernizing, for example, the Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, which sits on the grounds of the School for the Deaf. So things like that, which don't actually necessarily get the headlines, but obviously to the people they impact, it's very important.
Well, particularly the carve-out for protections for senior citizens who are eligible for home health services.
Yes.
That seemed to be something that needed to be sure it found a paragraph in the legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's moving. It'll be heard this coming week in appropriations. So we make sure that there are no fiscals, and I think we got that all cleaned up. So I assume it'll be going for full passage in the Senate the week after next.
And I happened to notice, as a side note, that it was 1 year ago this month that IACE 2 was signed by Governor Holcomb.
Oh, well, good for you. I did not know that. So that's a good omen for me. Thanks.
Those you take wherever the momentum may.
Darn right you do.
May be. There may be momentum with your colleague in the House. Tony, you and Matt Lehman have co-authored what is a House priority bill on health matters, specifically Medicaid fraud. Tell us a little bit what's going on under the hood with that one.
Well, what's crazy is that currently, if someone is fraudulently taking Medicaid, their only repercussion is just to ask to leave, right? I mean, there's really there's no criminal, there's nothing that they can get in trouble for, and it's like, you're stealing. So those of us that understand that, there needs to be some repercussions behind that. And this just puts a little teeth and a little warning, like, you might not want to do this. You might want to step in that lane because you're breaking the law. So that's kind of what that does.
And you're taking essentially probably the money from someone else, right?
That needs it.
Right, that needs it.
100%.
Yeah.
And it is on its way to the Senate. So lots of like-minded activity going on in that one. Another that came through with some bipartisan activity is one that emanated from your Senate Committee on Judiciary, Liz, and that is minor access and use of social media. This was approved early on.
Yes, that's another one. Senator Bohachik is the first author on that bill, but I agreed to go along with him, and again, heard it right out of the gate, like to get things moving. And I mean, everybody knows that our young people are maybe slightly obsessed with social media, and this just allows, again, along the line of parental rights, parents to have a say. And if they're fine with their children and accessing the apps, that's great. But this gives the parents another tool. And I think we didn't get quite as much pushback as we thought. I think the companies understood that it would be pretty hard to defend. The current parental controls that are out there are a little squishy sometimes, frankly, and what is, PG or set for this child, parents may come upon and say, well, that's not what I want them to watch. And so this just gives them another guardrail, which I think is really good.
Well, if I can interject and add a little bit, as a parent of a 10, 12, 14, and 25-year-old, thank you, because clearly that addiction's real, and they just get down rabbit holes, and next thing you know, you've got to go clean up a mess. So getting parental control is key, because they don't know what they're doing right now. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And
you can't sit with them 24 hours a day,
no.
And yet, all of mine are older, but I'm getting into the grandchildren stage. Cell phones are essential, not just for communicating, but, so they're going to have them. So,
absolutely.
But you can't be there to control them all the time, so.
100%.
Right. We're speaking this evening with Republican State Senator Liz Brown, Republican State Representative Tony Issa here on Primetime. The phone number's on the screen if you would like to join. When you visit the website for the Indiana General Assembly, you can find the whole layout of legislation that's going through. And Tony, you've authored several. Rural utility infrastructure pops up as one bill that is providing seed money, grants for other activity that goes on. I need the rest of the sentence. Tell me about it.
So it's not going to get heard probably this year, but the goal is for rural communities. As a realtor, what you find out is these developments, the rural housing is there and it's available. Once you get the housing infrastructure in place. But what we want is to make sure that from the unit provider to the development, we can get that energy there. And that's the shortfall. That's where, in a rural community, that's where the real shortfall is, right? Getting the houses with the gas or the electric, that's one thing, but getting that major cost to bring it up to those developments, that's where we're really, I'm hoping in years to come to be able to move the needle.
And sometimes it seems, and Liz, you can speak to this, that a bill needs to move through a couple of sessions before it moves up. But it moves through anyhow.
Right, and I think it's always good to start the conversation, and then there'll be other people who say, whether it's other states will say, here's another way to fund that, right? Here's another way to make that happen, instead of just maybe the state just funding it completely. So yeah, I think it's always important though to put those ideas out there so you get a lot of other people participating.
A lot of great minds figuring it out together. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we drift too far from a topic we spoke of a few minutes back, Steve has checked in and is asking a question offline, which you're certainly welcome to do it, the number you see on the screen. But Steve would like to know, has there been any study or feedback on how the cell phone ban affected schools?
So, I can just speak anecdotally since I'm here in Fort Wayne Community Schools. I think they had a few schools piloting that beforehand. And to be honest, the schools could have done this all along, right? Every school could have made this decision. I think it actually, us, in a sense, being the ones telling them, made it easier for the schools to turn to the parents and say, this has got to stop, and the kids, put them in the bag or whatever system they're using. Mm-hmm. You'll get them. We carved out emergencies and exceptions, but people will tell you, it's almost like, I don't have to worry about it, right? Someone else has taken it away from the kids, so now they're going to focus on school. They don't have to check their TikTok. They don't have to see how many likes. They're just going to wait until they get off, right, at the end of the day.
I've talked to my superintendents, and they have all been appreciative. To your point, that some had already taken that initiative to a level, but other than a few parents getting upset over it, I'd say 99+% has been very supportive and understanding. They're there to learn. They're not there to be on social media talking to their friends. They're there to learn.
Let's stay with the electronic age because, Liz, you have Senate Bill 472 on cybersecurity.
Yes.
This is one of those where the concept had come up in a prior session.
Yes.
And so this year, the bill goes like how?
So we started with, well, actually, again, the concept was actually, for the first bill, was the schools needed some assistance because, of course, their cybersecurity insurance, as other units of government, is going sky high. But what we really want is, don't want them to have to use insurance, right? We want them to implement best practices. And the Indiana Office of Technology, IoT, has gone around to, I don't know how many units of government, sort of took their show around and given a lot of people as much help as they can. They help to host sites for governmental units, et cetera. And so the original draft of the bill was, we may set up a fund someday. We'd take that out because it was an off-budget year. And these are best practices, so it moved from a shall to may. We'd really like you to do this. Well, you know, this is the time. We cannot afford to have government agencies or school systems. They have a lot of data on citizens. They have to do this. So there's a fund with no money, maybe someday, but the idea too is we're going to give them a couple years to get their act together, and we will help them with our expertise at the state level. But there, you know, lots of money, a lot of tax dollars flow, a lot of student data and things like that. So there are some, you know, just like multi-factor authentication and things, simple things they can do to make sure that they're secure. Obviously, hackers are always trying to get into our infrastructure and things like that, water systems and sewer systems and things like that. But we're due for this.
And the probability this year feels like we're in the high 80, 90%?
Yeah, no, we passed committee, no issues, no pushback, and it'll also be heard this week in appropriations. We made sure there was no fiscal, so it's a fund with no money and should be going over to the House again in a week and a half.
To piggyback your comment, I mean, now more than ever, you need to have protection and make sure you have the pieces in place. Water, I mean, if that gets hacked, I mean, energy,
Right.
like imagine all that and how that could just shut everything down. So there's support. I can't imagine it not go through, especially not being any money involved.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
But speaking of money, you have a couple of tax bills, but they are tax, and you can describe why those are correct words, but not maybe totally so. LaGrange County innkeeper's tax and something about a local option sales tax.
So, and I'm going to tell the story. So I was at a dinner, and this wonderful woman comes up to me, and I was telling her about my idea of allowing local government to put in a local sales tax to help infrastructure. Again, if you notice, a lot of my stuff is wrapped around infrastructure needs for my community, just being able to tap some type of opportunities. And this very intelligent lawyer looks at me, she says, "Congratulations, a freshman raising taxes. See how that works out for you." The bill's not going anywhere right now. Again, as she said, just get the conversation started, kind of figuring it out, going from there. But I walked away, just kind of went, like she's right. But, and then as far as the, I had been asked by LaGrange County Tourism to ask to pull out and get an exemption to be able to potentially raise a innkeeper's tax up to 8% from 5%. Now that does not tax the locals. That brings revenue from the tourism. They have over 2 million that come into their communities during the summertime and spring and fall. So they're just trying to capture, and then they have, the young lady has a strategic plan to grow that whole industry. So it's already killing it anyways, but it's just a great opportunity.
Wow. Speaking of great opportunities, while there's time in the program, you have in Bill 488 a skills training pilot program. Speak of that.
That actually came from, I don't usually carry bills like that. That was the Department of Workforce Development, like 2 days before the deadline to file a bill. And I had worked with them on a small piece last year. And so they needed to sort of get it done and filed. But the idea is that we have people who are really close to the next level of whether it's getting their GRE or something like that, a skill, and yet they're sort of on this benefits cliff, right? So they they can't work too much, because if they do, they lose maybe their child care credit or whatever it is, right?
Okay.
And so the idea is, can we help them, sort of supplement them a little bit as they move? And then the goal, of course, is they get their certification, their training, they get a better paying job, and then they're off of, state entitlements or federal entitlements. So it's a win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So new concept, I think it's, the fiscal will be the issue, whether or not we can fund it. But I think it's a great idea. And I've heard employers tell me they have great employees, but usually they're single moms, frankly, and they can only work so many hours, because what they would lose in terms of all these other child care credits is they can't work anymore. And that just seems like an upside down system.
Yeah. Thoughts, comments on?
No, I'll tell you what. Feed a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. We're not doing enough of that. We need to really work towards moving that needle, giving people pride in being able to take care of themselves and giving them opportunities to do so. It's just going to help.
We have another offline question. This one is from John. Let's sneak this one in too. This is one that relates to any bills in the legislature that eliminate gerrymandering.
Well, I'm not on the election committee in the Senate. I've not seen any of those bills. I guess that presumes that there is gerrymandering, and I haven't seen it. So, but I haven't seen anything come through the Senate.
I'll second that motion.
And so there you are. But yet with the session, I would ask you both, we've heard so many factors: fully funding Medicaid, passing legislation for universal vouchers, continuing health programs like Health First Indiana, road funding, education funding. There is arguably more budget demand than budget supply, it would seem. What do you say to constituents about this budget process in this year?
Well, I'll sort of echo what Representative Issa said at the beginning. It's an opportunity. So we're going to right size our budget, and we're going to make sure we fund. We're going to make sure our safety nets for our most vulnerable are funded. We're going to make sure we fund K-12 and higher ed as we do, and we're going to make sure we have a robust Medicaid program that protects those who are eligible for it. But we're also going to look really hard at the things that, when you have a little extra money you funded, but is that really a need or is that a want this year? And that's not a bad place to be.
Mm-hmm. And from your colleagues in the House, or maybe even at this early hour?
It's just way too early to really get your head wrapped around all these bills and any of the opportunities that are coming. I know there's a lot of anxiety because of the shortfall. Listen, this state has been very responsible for decades, and they've done the right thing as best they could, and with great leadership. And by the way, she was the one that said about the bill. But so I think that take a deep breath, relax. We're going to be fine. It's just going to take some work.
Right. We're going to work on property taxes. We're going to work on a robust budget, and I'm confident we'll get it done by sine die.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And as we head through these coming weeks and into the second half of the session, when that pops up after a brief timeout, what other pending legislation are you following during the session? Maybe it wasn't a bill you wrote, but it's a bill maybe you wish you did, or it's a subject about which you have a vested interest or passing curiosity. There are a number of them out there. Do any come to mind?
Well, my constituents, and I come from local government, so you can only imagine Senate Bill 1 is front of focus, front of mind for many of my groups. So we're waiting to see, but again, it's going to morph, it's going to change, it's going to evolve, so we'll see. But that's probably one of my bigger ones that I'm looking at.
That's really based on the governor's property tax agenda. It's a big bill. It's a big lift in terms of what it's looking to do. There are also bills out there reducing the income tax more than where we already are. There are bills on eliminating or reducing the business personal property tax. So there's a lot of interest. I don't sit on tax, but we have those discussions in our caucus. There's a lot of interest in how to right size property taxes. But as we all know, that's a local decision. I mean, locals could cut property taxes today. That's their power and authority. So, but we've been listing the last 2 years, and constituents are not happy. And so we have to figure out how to right-size property taxes for the locals and make sure that they still have the funds they need to fund libraries and airports and roads and everything else. So,
Last one is 1007 for me, and that's the nuclear opportunities that we have going on and the potential for it to help supplement our electric.
that puts us in the forefront of other states. I don't think people appreciate the work that our two utility chairs are doing. That will really prepare Indiana for the future. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Well, we wish you the best in your work in Indianapolis. Thank you for sharing where all that has taken you, even in these fleeting days since the start of things back in January. We have been speaking today with State Senator Liz Brown, State Representative Tony Issa, and for all of us with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. Thank you for speaking and watching with us, and we'll be back again next week, same time and station. Take care. Have a good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
the Kendallville Area Chamber of Commerce, in partnership with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, presents the National Civics Bee local competition. Essays are due February 4th, and the Top 20 competition is March 13th. Details at kendallvillechamber.com. The Rogers Company has been conducting business in Northeast Indiana since 1944 as Rogers Markets and now as the Rogers Company with commercial property and real estate development. Pleased to support local not-for-profits and PBS Fort Wayne. The Regional Chamber of Northeast Indiana advocates for world-class infrastructure, a competitive business climate, 21st century talent, and rural investment. One region, one voice. NEINadvocates.com.